lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and with me today I have writer David Quinn with me, legend in the indie scene. You have done some of the big publishers too, which I'm more familiar with your indie stuff. So I'll be honest off the bat, but Faust, re-releasing it, Outlaw comics, all that kind of good stuff. I'm super stoked to have you on the show, dude. Finally.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to do it. Since you mentioned Faust, I mean, we're at this point just humbled by the response to the Kickstarter. There were sometimes that if you go back and you go back 10 years ago to when we put out the last couple issues, you see why we're humbled, because there wasn't a huge, there was a huge cry among fans to get the issues. But then when we put them out, they got orders of like 3,000 for 14, 5,000 for 15. And these are like a tenth of the numbers we had at Faust peak. And we were like, oh, okay, I guess we're over.
Yeah.
And then for 10 years after that, starting with Titan and going all the way through till the Kickstarter, we talked to just about every publisher that you would think would be a good home to be a partner with us. And most people were like, oh, I'd love to buy that, but I'm afraid I can't sell it, for whatever reason. So, I mean, we were sort of untouchable. So here we put the Kickstarter out there. We cross our fingers. We hope we can just, hit our number 30,000, and we hit the number in 20 minutes. And I was like, wow, you fans, you super fans, you Faustians, I love you. You guys are great. Thank you so much. You're really helping us, because nobody wanted to help us. Not quite nobody. We do have some partners behind the scenes, and we'll be able to talk about who they are later. But, it was the fans that came through for us. So I'm starting today and every day grateful to the fans. And so now we're going to get the book put together, right? I mean, we got the orders. We could pay for it. Printer's ready. Everything's ready on the book except final tweaks to like resize the cover and put the indicia on and get the UPC codes, ready and stuff like that. So, we're going to spend the rest of this year and the first couple of weeks of January getting things put together so we can put together this oversized hardcover signed edition. And then it'll be getting printed in Korea through our friends in Los Angeles. That could take 6 months. They'll tell you 4, but then you have to worry, how long is it going to sit at customs, right?
Yes.
In the industry.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I've helped Shelley Bond. I don't know if you're familiar with Shelley Bond.
Yeah.
So I kind of developed a little bit of a friendship with her, and I've helped. I've gone down to pick up all the books, the pallets of books for her, and I've seen how like they keep it's on its way, especially with COVID. That put a really big kink in the chain.
But one good thing about this is doing it now and doing it early and telling everybody in advance. When we went to North American printers in US and Canada, they said, oh, we can't do a hardcover for a year. So in Korea, we can get it in 6 months. And that's still a long time. And it may even take longer than 6 months, but they're trying for 6 months. So at least we can tell people now and be honest with them, so that we don't say it's coming out in March. And then in March, we say, well, no, we meant July.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the important thing with Kickstarters, is as long as the creators are super like vocal about what's going on and say like they're not just ghosting you and you hear nothing. And I think especially nowadays, at least me personally, I won't speak for others, but I expect it to take a long time because I part-time work at a comic book shop, so I know the inner workings of what all goes into all this stuff and how long it can take, the paper shortages, all that good stuff. Not good stuff, but all that stuff going on with the industry over the pandemic.
You just have to build in the extra time.
Exactly.
Like, there's a Hulk book I want to read, the Immortal Hulk Omnibus, right?
I
read all those stories, and the few I did read entertained me a lot. So I had to take a look at it, and I don't even think about when it's coming out. But after I had pre-ordered it from my retailer, I was like, oh, wait a second. When does this come out? Oh, almost a year from now. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great
That's the
run.
state of the art. That's where we're
Yeah,
at
for
now.
sure. Well, let's get a little bit of little bit of backstory on Faust for anybody that's not as familiar with it. Because I do know that you put a cap, which is unusual. It's very unique, and people usually like just let it run on a Kickstarter, but you put a cap on how many books you guys would do for the Kickstarter. But I heard plans that you will release it to stores. But before we talk about that, a little backstory on the character. This came out during the black and white '80s explosion. Something I wasn't necessarily around for, but I'm a huge fan of going back to it. So I'd love to hear the kind of inner workings of the story behind it.
Oh wow. Well, probably many people have heard some of this, so I'll try to be concise. Most people know that Tim Vigil did a book called Grips
Yep.
from a disreputable little California company called Silverwolf, which doesn't exist anymore for good reason. But he became the darling of high octane and high blood body count, very, expressive, in your face, black and white comics. And there was huge demand for him to do more stuff. So, of course, he did something different and did a sword and sorcery future space opera thing called Omega. And we put together 3 issues of that because he was introduced to me when someone who knew him and was backing him said, you might want to get someone who's, a writer to help you. You're great and your story's fun. And if you had a writer, you could really like polish it up and give it what a writer can give in terms of a voice and a feel and the mood of the language and stuff. So that was we were introduced at a comic shop by a comic shop owner who knew me, and I was teaching at City University, Brooklyn College out in Brooklyn, and this was my local place to pick up comics. Hey, Pat Nuke. And we had an interesting meeting. And I was very excited by Grips, of course, and the opportunity to meet Tim. But I was working as a few different things. I was working as a waiter in a Greenwich Village coffee shop. I was working as a adjunct professor teaching freshman English to the City University kids. And I was working on a master's degree in writing with Jack Gelber, the Beat Generation writer. Another teacher at that school was Allen Ginsberg, pretty interesting person to work with. So I was in this very literary side and very theatrical side, and I was working in off Broadway with my little showcases and plays that I would write, and sometimes even write and direct. And that's what my stage was at that time, and that's what my comic book page was at that time. It was sort of underground theater. We hit it off, Tim and I, out of like sort of, I think I had some borrowed respect because my comic shop owner friend had really said, this guy's a really interesting writer and he really knows comics. He hasn't written comics before, but he really knows comics and loves comics. And I think he'd give your work a whole other, voice to go with your incredible vision. And, so we kind of, I had a little borrowed respect, and he had proven respect from what he put on the page with Grips. And we met, and it was just kind of very, very casual, very soft-spoken sort of meeting. I tended to be a very cocky young man at the time, so I really felt, I think I even voiced it to him. I really said, I think, working with a good writer would make you even better. Something cocky like that. So, but, he took it, he was like, thank God, open-minded. So began a 35-year partnership. And we've worked on all sorts of different things, some of which you haven't even seen yet, because sometimes they take us a long time. But yeah, we'll probably always be working on something. Right now, it's a big goal, obviously, of the last 10, 12 years of mine has been get everything back into print, make it available for the fans, make it available for new readers, make it available for comic historians who are interested in our tiny little slice of the genre, and hopefully get some creators paid. You know what I mean? Because it's been a long time. It's been since the 90s that this was a really profitable enterprise. So it will be again, because we'll have it permanently in print. I'm not announcing the permanent in print stuff because it sounds like it's promising something that's not concrete yet. At this point, we are promising this Kickstarter. You know, the fans have backed it, and it's coming out, and it is a limited edition because that is what we did for the super fans. They will have the most collectible Faust item there is.
Yeah, very, very stoked for it. I mean, Faust was something that I discovered recently, right? Like I haven't like I love comic books. I love everything. There's nothing that I won't at least try once. You know what I mean? Like if it's kind of like it's kind of the way I'm with food. Like I'll always try something. I may not like it, but I'll try it. You know, I'm always open for it. And you know, just for that first visual image of the character, like it's just such a visceral look, you know, and I'm like, I have to know more. And you know, I'm sure you're aware, right, of cartoonist kayfabe. I would have to imagine that you're aware of what they've done. And I think, and I like to think, that, well, I mean, I wouldn't have checked it out. I wouldn't have known about Faust, to be honest with you, if they didn't talk about it and they didn't praise it as much as they did. Because I just, you know, there is so much stuff, especially from that era. That's what fascinates me, is that really like punk rock era of comics where everybody was just everybody could make a comic book. I mean, it's that way now because of Kickstarter as well, but like there were so many tiny little publishers, and sometimes I'll just go through like mycomicshop.com. You can click on a year, right? And I'll just go through everything and I'll just buy a random book. But I think it's cool that, you know, Faust got new eyes on it, and kind of, I think it breathes, I think like kind of new life into it. And I think that's what kind of in social media is what helped the eyes get back onto Faust, because now you don't have to worry about a publisher. You don't have to worry about somebody else. And I feel like, you know, maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't the same thing. You know, like you couldn't just push stuff like that.
I was
right?
sitting in London with the editors of Titan who said they wanted to do it. But a year later, they couldn't get it on their schedule, and they started working with Doctor Who. And, you know, even if they had a little love in their heart for this, you know, extreme, crazy niche book for the people that want absolute over-the-top operatic horror comics, you know, I mean, maybe if they had a little love in their heart for that, they'd still want to do it as a hobby. But come on, publishing Doctor Who in England, that's something you want to put your energy into, because it's going to make your company. You know, we went to every publisher you can think of.
Yeah.
And they were all respectful, and they were saying, oh, this is comics history. This is going to be great. Oh, but I'm not publishing it. You know?
I mean, yeah, I can, it's got to have that special publisher that really like believes in it, right? Like I think like any project, you have to have the belief of the publisher that's putting it out. Otherwise, they're not going to put in the effort that's needed, you know, to make something be successful. It can't just be the creators pumping their stuff out. It has to be the whole team of people that are involved with that book. And I think that that's what I love about Kickstarter. That's what I love about the freedom that I see given to people like yourself and Tim. Like, you guys can control this. You guys, you have to do more of the work a little bit, right? Because like now you're the one talking to the printers and stuff, but you can get it to the people that want it. You can get it to the fans. I mean, I personally saw the image that you guys shared on Instagram, and I was like, I put an alarm in my phone so that I would know when the Kickstarter launched. So I made sure that I got it, you know, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that did that.
No, you couldn't have been the only person that did that. When we hit 30,000 in 20 minutes, I mean, there were a lot of people who were like, okay, I missed issue 14. It's $250. Yeah. For half that price, I can get the whole thing. I got to wake up.
Hell yeah. So let's talk a little bit about like, what made you finally decide to do the Kickstarter? Like what finally were you like, I don't need everybody else. We can do this ourselves.
Well, we'd lined up certain partners, and again, I'm being vague because it's not been officially announced, and by agreement with these partners, we're not talking about it specifically and by name yet.
Okay.
But anyway, we have people that are helping us with design work, people that are helping us with working on the covers, obviously people working with us to help us make sure everything gets printed right. You know, people that have more printing experience printing hardcovers than I do. You know, and ultimately also the distribution side. So we have these, you know, we have this team, but it's still always been a do-it-yourself kind of thing for Tim and I. And sometimes when we work with other partners, we would go down kind of a bad road where, you know, one person might keep the money, the other person might sort of not do everything that they said they were going to do. You know, so, and especially because the content is extreme and risky for many people. I think some people were attracted to that, especially in the beginning, but other people were very scared of that. So, I mean, we just always sort of had to stay do it yourself. So Kickstarter was one solution. Originally, I didn't think I needed it to, actually, this is good for any of you youngsters who are thinking of doing Kickstarter. Maybe you have the money, right? Because I had the money to print. I could have paid for a print run initially. We had a bad year, so some stuff happened to that money and it's not all there anymore. But still, initially, if we had printed this book when I first, you know, set up the mechanisms to print it like about a year ago, then we would have just paid for it ourselves and gotten partners to help us get it through distribution. But by going with Kickstarter, we actually, and I think you mentioned this, we actually kind of enhanced the awareness of Faust and reconnected with a community of about 800 people that, you know, are real close to the book personally and have like, if they can buy it, they will. So, you know, that was energizing and that was reconnecting. And now they're all on board. And it's a platform not only to do this, but also eventually to get everything that Tim and I have done together. And probably some of the stuff that we've done without each other, but independently, back in print. So it's Kickstarter became sort of a platform. And probably any crowdfunder could have done it. You know, I talked to Zoop and I talked to Crowdfunder, and I was impressed with what they were all doing. And they were all trying to work with us and differentiate themselves. And Oriana at Kickstarter was great. And the guys at Zoop were great. And the guys at Crowdfunder were great. They were all really, really trying to help us reach our people and deliver what we could deliver. Crowdfunding in general will help you build or rebuild your community. So now we feel very connected to these people. We're going to be giving everyone who pledged and anyone who follows us, whether they pledged or not, you know, has places where they can find me on my blog or social media, Tim on Patreon or social media, or our page. There's going to be a page for the Faust book. Because once your campaign is over, you can make a spotlight page that I guess lives forever, or at least I'm sure lives until you deliver the book. So it's a community we intend to stay in touch with, right? Yeah. Send them pictures of what's happening, send them a little update on where we are. Could be good news, like, oh yes, the signing book plates are all done. Here's a picture of one. Or it could be bad news, like, oh, they tell us it's stuck at customs for another 6 weeks or something like that. Whatever it is, you know.
So I want to get into a little bit of like kind of like the nerdy questions for book nerds, you know.
Yeah.
So the book is originally printed. I mean, the first few. I don't know when it stopped, but I'm pretty sure most of it was newsprint, right? So how are you guys like, I guess, remastering it kind of for this hardcover? Are you is it going to be like the stark white? Is it going to be kind of an off-white to kind of emulate a little bit of the newsprint? What can we kind of expect in terms of the guts of the book without giving too much away?
No, that's a good question. And I you know, for me, it's kind of a learning because we've always had people helping us print our books. And so you know, we had decided that we really liked the experience of reading the Faust communions. Do you know the ones I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think so.
These,
Yes, yeah.
there's 4 of them, and they collect the first 12 issues, 3 at a time, right? These aren't not really available anymore, although you see them on eBay and stuff. I have a few from my collection. But you know, we really like the experience of that paper. It's heavier than most, and it's a little glossy. And I think Tim likes this even more than I do, because sometimes I like a real flat white paper. Like there's a great collection of Mark Schultz's Xenozoic Tales.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of one of my models for how I wanted our book to be.
Okay.
And that happens to be a very what's the opposite of glossy? Flat, right? They call it flat.
Like a matte.
Yeah. And I like that too. But you know, I'll always, you know, on a question of how the art is produced on paper, I'm always going to defer to Tim, right? Because you know, he's the illustrator, and he preferred the glossy, which I also like. And we just wanted to make sure it's a heavy enough paper that the book has a heft and a solidity to it, and the pages don't ghost. You know what I mean? You can't see anything if you hold it up to a little bit of light. You can't see anything on the other side really in a glaring way. You have to make a really bright light to be able to see what's on the other side of the page you're reading.
Okay.
So you know, it's almost 500 pages, this book. So you have to give it some weight. The cover as a hardcover can't be a, you know, tiny thin hardcover, right? And what else can I tell you about what's the content? I mean, it was there right there on the Kickstarter, but I'll review. I mean, it's all the pages of the story. There's a little interview we did with our friend Jay, and that's personal, very personal.
Yeah.
Just like what would happen if you'd sat down with us at a convention table in New York Comic Con, which is where it was recorded. There's testimonials from our friends, cartoonist Kayfabe and other places.
Yeah.
There's a little funny little Jim Rugg Faust fan art on that page, which is
cool,
kind of a treat. There's a kind of a more sort of cultural critic perspective by a writer and blogger named Clint Finleaf. And then there's what am I forgetting? And there's some other you know, background art and other information.
Very cool.
And other like distillations of quotes from the book, you know. There's not a huge amount of sketchbook type material, like really raw, rough, unfinished work. This isn't, we decided there was already 500 pages, and so this was not the best place to present that. You know, Tim will probably do some kind of a Tim Vigil behind the scenes art book someday. I'd buy that.
I mean, I would too. I'm sure everybody that backed this Kickstarter would back that as well. So, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to assume. I mean, I know there's still time left on the Kickstarter. People can still kind of support if they want. But with this experience being as successful as it was in such a fast manner, is this something that you guys will continue to do? Have you talked about it, or is this going to be the Kickstarter that kind of lets you guys step out of Kickstarter and launch it separately? Like, what have you guys talked about in terms of those plans?
We've talked about doing traditional publishing, and also we've talked about doing more Kickstarter.
Okay.
And ultimately, you know, without getting into specific plans and promising dates and whatnot, I mean, the goal would be to have everything in print and available, so every store, including bookstores, right, not just comic shops, so every store could have it and could offer it. And so, you know, we'll just keep on finding the right solution for that with the partners that we've established by now. So there'll be more about that, but that's all further down the road. We really have, you know, the work to do right now to deliver this book
Right.
for the diehard fans that really supported us and get it out there.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm very excited to get that in print. I mean, I have sporadic issues. I don't have the entire full run, like you said. It's especially with cartoonist kayfabe. The minute they talk about a book, that book skyrockets in value. Yeah,
That's
so
coming for you.
yeah, I literally like because I'm on the West Coast, so their videos drop at 6 a.m. my time. So I'm
Mm,
up because I work in the restaurant. So the minute, like, if it even looks like it's something based on the cover that I want, I don't watch the episode. I go to eBay and I'm like, if this is a reasonable price, I buy it. I mean, some stuff they put up, it's already far out of my price range, but yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved Faust when I checked it out. It's everything that I love about the 80s books that I have read. You know, obviously haven't read everything, but it's that grassroots, that punk rock that I talked about that I just love. And
mm,
I'm just so stoked to get like a really nice hardcover to put on the shelf. I can't
yeah,
wait to
thank
see
you.
it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned punk because I was a kid in the 70s, and obviously when I had a band, it was punk influence. It was a little sort of dance punk because it was a little later. It was like 1980, 82. But anyway, that ethos and that DIY, um, and the grit of that time, and the kind of audacity of it still appeals to me. So when I discover someone with the same spirit today, even if their music doesn't sound like my punk, if it has that DIY spirit, if it has that audacity, if it has someone pushing themselves out there, maybe trying to, maybe they're another person like I was when I was a kid who's living a little too much in my head, and needed to get out and connect my head to my body. So I needed to jump and scream and,
Yeah.
I needed to be mind, body, and soul instead of just mind. I think whatever school or my experience with school left me too much in my head, and punk rock helped me get out. Today, in its own way, the improvisational bands, whether you're talking about, the Dead and Fish and the followers of that religion, or whether you're talking about classic example, jazz, right? The improvisational bands also inspire me a lot too. Tim and I had a real interesting experience doing a book called QV Underground. I don't have one handy to hold it up. This is kind of typical of us. We finally did a con sketchbook, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess when we decided to put it out? Right as COVID was starting.
I haven't even heard of
no
that
conventions and a great con sketchbook. And
Nice.
I brought this up because here's this improvisational thing. The book is essentially a book of pinups and monologues. They're inspired by each other. So it's his vision, my voice. And it's called QV Underground. And the only way you can get a copy is from me and Tim, because we're the only people that have them. And there's only a few hundred. But anyway,
well, put me on the list. I
okay.
definitely want to get
All right.
one.
Well, I'll hook you up. But we sometimes would have a monologue by me, and then Tim would create a drawing that would make a little one image drama of that, drama. And sometimes it would go the opposite way. And I'd provide a voice to his vision, right? So, I mean, that was like, wow, this improvisational stuff can be done even in something as crafted as comic art. They're not comics. They're properly, I guess you'd call them illustrations with a monologue next to them.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I love that because it's such a like collaborative effort on like that's so different than creating a comic. I've never
Mhm.
heard of something like that. And I mean, obviously 35 years of friendship and collaboration, like you guys have to know the inner workings of each other, and almost, I would I mean, I don't know, but I would imagine like be able almost to like kind of finish each other's sentences, kind of in that sense of creatively, like
Sometimes.
kind of knowing what the other person wants without maybe having to give as much direction. I don't know.
Well, we both have done well by trusting each other. I know that, both in business, but also in creativity. Um, I will do my damnedest to trust Tim's instincts, and I know he does the same with me. And sometimes it breaks down. Like we worked on I plotted a Faust spin-off, I guess you'd call it.
Mhm.
But it was really almost like a alternative world Faust. It's like, what if we put all these rebel characters in a prehistoric sword and sorcery world? That's fun. We can make it self-contained. We can make it violent and crazy and a little bit sexy, but it's not going to be, 35 years of satanic rituals coming
Yeah,
back again. It's going to be a bunch of stuff that's maybe a little more fun.
I'd buy that. That sounds dope.
And but I think that idea was a little extreme for Tim, and so we tried something else, and that to me wasn't what the characters needed to do, and it didn't feel like, I don't know. We both sort of had a bunch of different ideas for what to do with the Faust spinoff, and we couldn't get on the same track at the same time. So we shelved that, and we'll come back to it later. And we played with something else totally different, which I really hope we can show you. It's a departure for us.
Oh man, I want to see
It's
that.
not
Yeah,
as much as it's not as crazy a departure as like my children's books that I did,
mhm.
uh, but it is definitely not what you'd expect us to do next. But if you've done like 500 pages of Faust, and that doesn't even count all the spin-off stuff we did at Avatar, right?
Right.
If you if you've done that much of it, I don't know. I'm hungry to do something that might be just as exciting, transgressive, audacious, interesting, epic, but in a slightly different key. So I don't want to just do Act 16.
Of course. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Definitely.
mean, so I guess I talked about all that because you were talking about 35 years of collaboration. And I would just reiterate, I mean, when we trust each other, we both get better.
Yeah. I
So
mean, it's very unique. 35 years is, I mean, 30, some people can't even stay married that long without like leaving each other, So the fact that
yeah.
you guys can still collaborate, I mean, that's a testament to you both. I mean, I think that's amazing that you guys are still, connected in that way, collaborative, and you guys can still stand each other, for lack of a better way of saying it. Because like I said, like I mean, relationships break down, friendships break down all the time, and especially when you have business involved. I
Yeah.
know that can be, it can be kind of,
Well,
testing.
we're both pretty straightforward on the business stuff, and
Yeah.
we're both pretty certain in our like spine that you want to be fair to each other. So we both try to be our word as far as all the business stuff, and we've succeeded enough to stay working together. Where other collaborations that were exciting and producing exciting work, the people, like you said, couldn't stand each other. Well, we can stand each other. Maybe sometimes it helps that we aren't constantly together. He's in Sacramento, I'm in New York.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's together in a creative alternity, but it's not together like living in each other's pockets.
Right, right, for
But
sure.
our families are friends. I know his family, he knows mine. We do share some of those. He'll send me a fun drawing on my dog, or I'll send him a cheesecake because he loves New York cheesecake. And go ahead, people listening to this, send Tim a New York cheesecake. He'll thank you. I hope he
Or
gets inundated with cheesecake.
that would be hilarious. He just opens his door and there's a bunch of cheesecakes on his doorstep.
Cheesecake's here again,
Yeah.
Tim.
So like what's the typical day for writing? Because I mean I've always heard from multiple people that write, like you write every day, right? Like it's a good practice to develop. I know it starts when you're first beginning, but I was wondering, does that continue on all these years later? Do you constantly, are you maybe not all day long, but are you always writing something down and get a little idea?
Oh yeah. Um, I can't really turn it off for one thing, right? So if I would take um, a whole weekend off, right? A whole weekend away from writing, I'm still going to write. I'm still going. My creative mind is not sleeping, so I'm still going to write myself a few little notes with a text or an email or the notes app on the phone, or even like talk to the voice app, and record something that is, part of a song or part of a story. So for one, I can't turn it off, and for the other, it's the right discipline to have, because in a way, professional writing is the real job is making sure you get paid.
Yeah.
So somehow something has to pay you, and I've had times when that was, the money in off Broadway theater is basically non-existent. You're lucky to break even. So that was an early lesson, and it was the same in the music business too. I mean, we eventually made some money in the music business, but not, never Michael Jackson money. It was just to name someone who had a huge album the same year that we put our album out.
Yeah.
But your job is getting paid, so you can do what you love and what you do at your core, and that is your creative art, your storytelling, your visualizing, whatever it is. So one, you can't turn it off. Two, be responsible, get paid, and then you have the joy of being able to do it. So yeah, right now, I'm in a fortunate position that I did enough business writing on the side from the years 2000 to 2012. No, 2016. Oh man. So there was a lot of business writing that paid very, very well during that time. And it kind of replaced the way I was in the 90s, where I was writing about a script a week to sell them to the big publishers, as well as to do the occasional, indie book, a Faust or a Night Vision, or, The Littlest Bitch, or whatever else I was doing would come out, and hopefully pay something. And then there was also a publisher that was giving me a check for something I would turn in on property that they owned. So like after I did the business writing, as I really kind of hit a wall when the comics industry hit a wall at the end of the 90s. And it was like, honestly, one day it seemed like there were 100 guys that could make a good living in comics writing stories for big publishers, and it seemed like the next day it was about 40. It really was a huge drop, and I wasn't one of the 40. I was just too strange, I guess. So I was one of the ones who went and wrote for corporate websites and wrote for corporate executives and wrote for human resources departments, and wrote training and engaged employee engagement and marketing copy for that decade or decade and a half, and then called myself a writer again of my stuff. And I live sort of a semi-retired existence where I just work on my stuff, and I'm really working only on stuff that I own or co-own. And everything everything I've written that I own or co-own is also something I'm working with a manager on, trying to find a place for it in film and TV. I'm working on a pitch Bible now for our attempts to produce a dark suspense, dark sort of supernatural 1 hour drama based on the Night Vision comic that I did with Hannibal King.
Oh, cool.
And as you probably heard, Sony had optioned Faust for an animated series.
I did see that, yeah.
So that is still a going concern, but at this point, Sony's option has expired, and Sony's not involved in the project anymore. So it's interesting when you get an option, you get some money, and you have the support of a company like Sony backing all your pitches to the streamers, but you still have to sell to the streamers. And they may or may not have a relationship with Sony, and may or may not have a relationship with you, and it may not work. So it didn't work immediately, and the option expired. And then we still want to do that, and we're still working with a producer selling that. It's the same person, our friend Matt Pizzolo. He's a writer-producer who's done a lot of interesting work with his company, Black Mask.
Yes.
And he's basically kind of helping me manage trying to make television, because television has kind of changed since I wrote Faust and Night Vision. Television is very much a writer's medium.
I know, it's crazy. It's a TV,
and it's a great
awesome
form for a long form drama that's also episodic, right? It's both continued and episodic. And what else is comics? It's a natural.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
so you heard of it.
Huh?
You heard about the Sony deal?
Yes, I did hear about the Sony deal.
That was another thing that like woke people up, like, oh, those guys are still alive.
I know. I think the books went up a little bit in value when that announcement, because that wasn't that long ago, right? Like, I feel like it was, I don't know. I saw it somewhere, and I'm like, I'm just curious. Like, let's see if the books went up. I was like, yep, of course they went up. Anytime something's announced on any type of announcement for a show, a movie, doesn't matter how far out it is, doesn't matter how small the character is, those books shoot up. But I would love to see a Faust animated series. I think that'd be fucking dope. So,
well, we still want to do it. We've got some great ideas, and we've got some real interesting people interested. We're just waiting for the right streaming networks or I call it a streaming network. I don't think that's the right streamer.
Yeah,
wait for the right streamer to be the right partner.
Yeah, well, I'm super stoked. I think it'll definitely has a place somewhere for sure. And before we kind of like wrap this up, I know you're busy. I know you're busy with the book and getting all that stuff done, all the little intricacies. But is there anything else that you're working on right now that you can kind of talk about or tease to any of us?
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Well, besides working on the Night Vision TV pitch, which has been front and center on my desk with the Faust Kickstarter for the last couple months, I think this year will be the year that I launch with my partner Vincent Zarzolo of Metropolis Comics here in New York a direct market comic series that is kind of a blend of, well, it's kind of a Trojan horse sort of book. On the surface, it really seems to sort of be a crime book, right? But underneath the surface is all sorts of emotional stuff that's a little pushed, and trauma that's a little pushed. Deals a little bit with racism in our society right now, so there's a little tension of that going on, and it's so what sort of may sell itself on one hand as a crime book. It also has elements of comedy and relationships, and adult relationships that are, like, I think, pushing and slightly edgy within that context. So we're very excited about it. It's called The Addiction, and it involves a woman who didn't ask for this power, but she's got it. She can touch you, and her touch has the effect of whatever drug she is thinking about. Now, this is real comic book science. I don't know anyone that actually has this power. But if she's a living drug and she chooses to go into a drug world, you know, of cartels and crime, and kind of fight the war against drugs from the inside,
Hmm.
then, you know, you're gonna have some fun and kind of upside down adventure. So this is it's kind of a crazy book. So that's The Addiction, and we have a 3-issue miniseries that Claudia Balboni is illustrating.
Oh, I like
She's
her. She's
very excited.
awesome. Yeah,
She
yeah,
is.
she's awesome.
She's been doing I mean, people can see her work at Dark Horse and IDW and others, but she's like really coming into her own on this book, I think. I mean, maybe that sounds real like self-congratulatory, but I'm actually thinking like it it was time for her to have the attention that she's going to get on this book. So it's a great team, and it's a great book, and that's my direct market miniseries for 2023. There's other things I'm working on, and I want to find the right home for them, both in children's books, and I do some strange things in children's books. Like I'm working with other artists from the world that I come from. Vince Locke, who did Dead World and did Sandman.
Yeah, yeah.
He's done. He does Cannibal Corpse. I think he does the artwork for Cannibal Corpse, the musical
Mhm.
entity. um, so imagine him on a kid's book with the guy who wrote Faust. So that's
Yeah.
we're trying to do that. So I, I work on kids' books, and I also work still on adult books. And for me right now, I think adult books are something that continue to sell for me. It's where I come from. It's where you people know me. The Faust fans are willing to take a chance on me with some of my other non-Faust things because they know it's, you know, still my voice and my perception and my quirkiness and a little danger.
Yeah.
And you know, the kids book is something that I got into, frankly, when I became a dad. But now my daughter's going to college, and I'm still thinking of reading to little kids. I love reading to kids. No one is as honest, and no one is as responsive as when you read them a book about a little werewolf and howl at the moon, and they all howl with you. That's as good as as good as it gets.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot going on, and I already know I'm gonna want to talk with you again. Definitely when you got some more announcements, and we can kind of
Oh
delve
yeah.
deeper into that book. Um, and there's some stuff I didn't get to ask you today, but I definitely want to ask you again next time we chat, man.
Well,
Because
we're both pretty busy, but we worked this out, so we'll do it again. I've enjoyed
yes,
it.
yeah, man, I
You
had a
know,
blast talking with you.
I enjoyed talking to you, and I'm doing it at a great time because it gives me one more place to thank everyone who's supported me over the years, supported my partners, um, and supported my projects, our projects. You know.
All right, cool, man. Well, thank you. I'm going to drop all the links where to find you online and stuff like that, social media, your website, your blog.
Good.
But yeah, everybody if you want to just support the book, the book has been backed, but if you want to just, throw out some support, it's still on Kickstarter right now. It's got I think 3 weeks left, a little over 3 weeks left on the Kickstarter. And be on the lookout for all announcements that Mr. David Quinn has got coming out. And again, thank you so much for talking with me. And we are definitely going to do this again in the future.
Great. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. And thank you.